The scorching Nigerian sun blazed high in the sky, its unrelenting heat baking the red earth of Umuahia West until the ground shimmered like hot metal. The air was thick and dry, carrying the scent of dust, ripe plantains, and wood smoke. Tin roofs crackled under the heat, and chickens sought refuge beneath mango trees, wings lifted in silent protest against the sweltering day. Umuahia West was a place where time moved with the rhythm of the seasons and the pulse of tradition. Narrow footpaths wound between clusters of mud brick homes, their walls cooled with ash and prayers. Women in vibrant wrappers balanced water jugs on their heads, moving gracefully past clusters of boys playing football with a ragged ball. In the distance, the rhythmic sound of a hoe meeting soil echoed from the farms, where the land fed both body and soul. As the hot sun beat down on the dusty grounds of St. Mary's Secondary School, its rays glinting off the tin roofs of the classrooms. Among the bustling students and teachers, a young man named Chidi stood out, his crisp NYSC uniform a stark contrast to the faded uniforms of the students. Fresh out of university, Chidi had been posted to this remote town for his mandatory one-year service, a rite of passage for every Nigerian graduate. He had been assigned to teach mathematics, a subject he was passionate about, but it was the students themselves who quickly became his greatest distraction. St. Mary's was a haven of youthful beauty. The girls, with their vibrant uniforms and playful laughter, seemed to radiate an energy that Chidi found impossible to ignore. Their tight skirts swayed provocatively as they walked, their perky breasts straining against the fabric of their blouses. Chidi, a handsome and charismatic young man, found himself drawn to their allure, his professional demeanor wavering under the weight of their seductive glances. At first, Chidi tried to resist. He reminded himself of his responsibilities, of the trust placed in him as a teacher. But the girls were persistent, their flirtatious remarks and lingering touches chipping away at his resolve. It started innocently enough: extra lessons after school, one-on-one sessions in the empty classrooms. Chidi justified it as a way to help them improve their grades, but deep down, he knew the truth. He was drawn to their youth, their vitality, their uninhibited desire. One afternoon, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the school grounds, Chidi found himself alone with Amina, a particularly striking student with curves that seemed to defy gravity. Her dark eyes sparkled with mischief as she leaned closer, her breath warm on his neck. "Mr. Chidi," she purred, her voice low and husky, "I don't think I understand this algebra problem. Can you explain it to me, privately?" Chidi's heart raced as he felt her hand brush against his thigh. The classroom, once a place of learning, now felt charged with a different kind of energy. He hesitated, torn between his duty and his desire. But Amina's gaze was relentless, her lips parting slightly as she leaned in closer. "Please," she whispered, her voice a siren's call. Before he knew it, Chidi was pulling her close, his lips crashing against hers in a feverish kiss. Amina moaned softly, her hands roaming over his chest, her body pressing against his. The classroom desk behind them seemed to beckon, a silent invitation to take things further. Chidi's hands trembled as he lifted her onto the desk, her skirt hiking up to reveal her lace-trimmed panties. With a hunger that surprised even himself, Chidi tore at her clothes, his lips trailing down her neck, his hands cupping her breast. Amina arched her back, her moans filling the empty classroom. "Mr. Chidi," she gasped, "I've wanted this for so long." Chidi's pants were tight, his erection straining against the fabric. He fumbled with his belt, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he freed himself. Amina's eyes widened at the sight of him, her hands reaching out to stroke his length. "You're so big," she murmured, her voice laced with awe. Without another word, Chidi positioned himself at her entrance, his tip teasing her wetness. Amina spread her legs wider, her hips rising to meet him. With a slow, deliberate thrust, he entered her, the tightness of her body sending a jolt of pleasure through him. Amina cried out, her nails digging into his shoulders as he began to move, his strokes deep and relentless. The classroom echoed with the sounds of their passion, the creak of the desk, the slap of skin against skin, the moans that escaped their lips. Chidi lost himself in the moment, his inhibitions forgotten as he pounded into her with a ferocity that left them both breathless. Amina's body trembled, her walls clenching around him as she cried out in ecstasy. Chidi followed soon after, his release erupting inside her, his seed spilling deep within her womb. As they lay entangled, their bodies glistening with sweat, Chidi felt a twinge of guilt. He had crossed a line he knew he shouldn't have. But as Amina snuggled into his chest, her lips brushing against his, he couldn't bring himself to regret it. Word of Chidi's encounter with Amina spread like wildfire through the school. The girls, once mere students, now saw him in a different light. Whispered conversations in the hallways, stolen glances during class, it was clear that Chidi had become the object of their desires. And he, unable to resist their charms, found himself indulging in more private lessons, each one ending in a passionate tryst. One day, as a group of girls huddled together during lunch, their laughter and giggles filled the air. "Did you hear about Mr. Chidi and Amina?" one of them asked, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Of course," another replied, leaning in closer. "They say he's amazing in bed." Amina couldn't stop talking about it. The girls erupted into a chorus of giggles, their voices carrying through the open window of the staff room. Inside, Mrs. Ngozi, a beautiful and mature teacher in her late 30s, sat at her desk, grading papers. Her husband, a man who had long since lost interest in pleasing her, had left her staff for affection. As the girl's words drifted through the window, Mrs. Ngozi's ears perked up, her curiosity piqued. That evening, as Chidi walked home from school, he felt a tap on his shoulder. Turning around, he was met with the sight of Mrs. Ngozi, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders, her lips curved in a seductive smile. "Mr. Chidi," she purred, her voice low and sultry, "I couldn't help but overhear the girls talking about you. I must say, I'm intrigued." Chidi's heart skipped a beat as he took in her beauty. Mrs. Ngozi was a woman in her prime, her body curvaceous and inviting. The thought of being with her, of experiencing her maturity and passion, sent a thrill through him. "Mrs. Ngozi," he stammered, his voice hoarse with desire, I don't know what to say." Mrs. Ngozi stepped closer, her hand brushing against his chest. "Say you come to my house tonight," she whispered, her breath warm on his ear. "Let me show you what a real woman can do." Chidi's resistance crumbled under the weight of her gaze. I'll be there, he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. As night fell, Chidi made his way to Mrs. Ngozi's house, his heart pounding with anticipation. The air was thick with the scent of blooming flowers, the sounds of the night creating a sensual backdrop for what was to come. Mrs. Ngozi answered the door, her silk robe clinging to her body, her lips curved in a welcoming smile. "Come in, Mr. Chidi," she purred, leading him into the dimly lit living room. The room was filled with the soft glow of candles, the air heavy with the scent of incense. Mrs. Ngozi turned to face him, her robe slipping off her shoulders to reveal her naked body. Chidi's breath caught in his throat as he took in her beauty, her full breast, her slender waist, her hips that seemed to beckon him closer. Without a word, Mrs. Ngozi reached out, her hands pulling him close. Her lips crashed against his, her tongue dueling with his in a passionate kiss. Chidi's hands roamed over her body, his fingers tracing the curves of her breast, his palms cupping her firm buttocks. Mrs. Ngozi moaned into his mouth, her body pressing against his, her desire palpable. She led him to the bedroom, the soft glow of the candles casting a romantic ambience. The bed, adorned with silk sheets, seemed to invite them to indulge in their passions. Mrs. Ngozi pushed Chidi onto the bed, her hands roaming over his body, her lips trailing kisses down his chest. Chidi groaned, his hands tangling in her hair, his body arching off the bed as she lavished attention on him. With skilled fingers, Mrs. Ngozi undid his pants, her hands wrapping around his throbbing erection. Chidi gasped, his head falling back against the pillow as she began to stroke him, her touch sending waves of pleasure through him. "Mrs. Ngozi," he moaned, his voice thick with desire, "I need you." Mrs. Ngozi smiled, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Then take me," she whispered, positioning herself above him. With a slow, deliberate motion, she lowered herself onto him, her body engulfing him in a wave of heat and tightness. Chidi groaned, his hands gripping her hips as she began to ride him, her movements sensual and deliberate. The room echoed with the sounds of their passion, the creak of the bed, the slap of skin against skin, the moans that escaped their lips. Mrs. Ngozi's body moved in perfect rhythm, her breast bouncing with each thrust, her hair cascading over her shoulders. Chidi lost himself in the moment, his hands roaming over her body, his lips trailing kisses along her neck. As their passion built, Mrs. Ngozi's movements became more urgent, her body trembling as she neared the edge. Chidi, sensing her need, reached up to cup her breast, his thumbs brushing against her nipples. Mrs. Ngozi cried out, her body convulsing as she reached her climax, her walls clenching around him in a vice-like grip. Chidi, driven by her passion, thrust upwards, his body tensing as he neared his own release. Mrs. Ngozi, sensing his need, leaned down to capture his lips in a feverish kiss, her body moving in perfect harmony with his. With a final, powerful thrust, Chidi erupted, his seed spilling deep within her, his body shuddering with the force of his orgasm. As they lay entangled, their bodies glistening with sweat, Chidi felt a sense of satisfaction he had never known before. Mrs. Ngozi snuggled into his chest, her lips brushing against his, her hands stroking his hair. "That was incredible," she whispered, her voice laced with wonder. Chidi smiled, his heart filled with a sense of contentment. But as he looked into Mrs. Ngozi's eyes, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The girls, the teachers, the whispers in the hallways, it was clear that his reputation was growing, and with it, the potential for consequences. As they lay together, the night air heavy with the scent of their passion, Chidi couldn't help but wonder what the future held. Would his secret remain hidden, or would the truth come out, threatening to destroy everything he had worked for? The thought sent a shiver down his spine, but as Mrs. Ngozi's lips brushed against his, he pushed the worry aside, lost in the warmth of her embrace. The story was far from over, and as Chidi drifted off to sleep, he couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation, a sense that the best, or perhaps the worst, was yet to come. Watch out for part 2.